Welcome to the Juan Carlos Maldonado collection. My name is Andrés Michelena. I am the managing director of the collection, and I welcome you to our newest show, Secret Affinities, Aesthetics of Two Worlds. In this show, Ariel Jiménez, the curator, wanted to put in contact two different productions. One of them is modern and contemporary, and the other one is pre-Hispanic production. By doing so, he wanted to create kind of a relationship between them, and as he mentioned on several occasions, is a way to start feeling all of the different relationships and dialogues that we can create between the two productions. In this occasion, we're going to count with our star guest, who is Damian, who's a very knowledgeable person in all related to pre-Hispanic production. And by doing so, I wanted to introduce her. Damian, PhD, is a professor of art history, formerly in the School of Art and Art History, and the former director and chief curator of the Patricia and Philip Frost Art Museum at Florida International University between 2008 and 2014. A specialist in Latin American and Caribbean art, her most recent work has been with Latin American women and Cuban exile artists, for whom she has written numerous catalogs and articles. She lectures frequently on Latin American and Caribbean art and has curated numerous exhibitions. She is the curator of the Kislak collection at the Miami-Dade College Freedom Tower and the curator of the Chapelle of La Merced at Corpus Christi Church in Miami. She is also the chairperson of the Miami-Dade County Art in Public Places Trust. Welcome, dear Caro. It's an honor to have you here in this occasion, and we want to extract from you the more that we can have about your knowledge about pre-Hispanic pieces. Mm-hmm. And there are some aspects that we want to somehow check, like symbolic, technical, and historical. Mm-hmm. And I know that you have a lot to say, and we have a lot to hear from you. So we're going to start with this amazing piece.
Right.
And let us know what you...
Well, thank you very much. I'm very happy to be here. As you know, I am in love with this exhibit. The first time I saw it, it was like I died and went to heaven, because this is exactly the kind of art that I have studied all of my life. I've dedicated myself to Peru. And the pre-Columbian pieces of Peru, and then all the way through the Inca and the colonial period. So what I know and what is really evident in this exhibit, and is evident in the whole trajectory of the pre-Columbian art of the Andes, and these works are from the Andean region, which is a huge culture area that the works that we're going to see here are mainly from the south coast of Peru, the territory that is north and south of Lima, if you sort of in your mind geographically where it is. Peru is very interesting because of the great changes geographically in the landscape. So we are going from desert cultures like Nazca all the way to forests and valleys into the high Andes. So you will have the Pacific, you will have the desert, and then you will have the snow of the Andes. This is a very important point, because so much of the art that we talk about when we talk about the pre-Columbian art of the Andes is determined by geography. The people that live in the desert have a totally different way of life than the people that live in the jungles or the valleys or the mountains. They have different materials available to them. They have different gods that they worship. They have a different lifestyle. So it's important to know where the work comes from. The work in this particular exhibit mainly is south coast of Peru, of Nazca Wari. And so these are empires, really. The Nazca is small, but then the Wari is an empire that takes over so much of the area, including Nazca, and then moves all the way up into Bolivia and to the Tiwanaku culture. So we're talking about a vast territory and an extraordinary amount of art produced by what we call the culture areas. Of course, for the peoples that were part of these cultures going back to about 1000 BCE, they did not have the geographic boundaries that we describe today. So we really talk about them in areas, culture areas. I like to start with this particular piece, which is Nazca Wari. This is late Nazca. It's dated, well, this says 500 to 750. It may even be a little bit later than that, because what you see here is a combination of the traits that establish the symbolic iconography, the repertoire for the artists when they produce works in Nazca, in the Nazca civilization, including the most amazing, of course, are the Nazca lines. So you can't talk about Nazca without saying, you know, the lines, because those creatures that are in the mountains and the hills and in the desert territories, the plains, are exactly the same as you see in the textiles and especially in the small vessels. They're the same characters. So when I look at this, I immediately want to identify the characters and the symbols, because that same character, these same lines, the serpent lines, are included in the pottery that we're going to see as well, and other textiles. So who are they? What is the symbolic? Why do this? What are they used for? Well, first of all, everything in this exhibit that comes from these Andean culture areas, everything is a burial good. These are not meant to be seen hung on a wall. They were never hung on a wall. They were wrapped around mummies. They were put as offerings in the tomb. This is art for the dead, not for the living.
It's ceremonial.
It's absolutely ritual, ceremonial, and it has to do with death cult rituals, because they're tombs, they're buried, and also ancestor worship. So the ancestors that are buried in these tombs and are given offerings are there because the people in their lives, the people that buried them, never want to forget them. And also, they never want to forget what that person represented in life. It's like the Egyptians. It's the same story of ancestor worship. Wow. So they bury things with the dead. And in the Nazca area, it is pottery and it is textiles. The textiles are in amazing condition because this is a desert. They're buried in the sand, and the silica of the sand preserves them. It never rains there, never ever rains. So they don't get wet, they don't get moldy. Is the first question everybody asks is, how come the colors are so beautiful? Well, because they've been buried in the sand for 1,000 years, so the colors have really stayed. A piece like this was part of a mummy bundle, or part of an offering, maybe wrapped up. One thing we know about the Nazca tombs and the Paracas tombs, which Paracas is the preceding area of the Nazca, and many of the designs are established by Paracas. What we know about them is that they had a pantheon of gods and goddesses, and they also found within their lives the means to talk to those gods. The Nazca lines are literally the gods waving. They're waving, and who are they waving? They're waving to the gods above, saying, I'm here, this is what I look like. These are my people. Please look at them. Look out for them.
We're here.
We're here. We're here. And how are the gods going to recognize who we are and why we're here and what we're here for? They're going to recognize them through the offerings, because that is going to be the stable, the eternal message. After the person dies, this is going to live on. The little pot is going to live on. So it's very important to, in this, what we call art, remember it wasn't art, it was never utilitarian, it was ritual. We are introduced to the stories, the personalities, who the person was. As we know, the more elaborate, the more beautiful things are buried with the dead, the more elite status that particular person had. Because who is going to weave for hours and hours and months and months? I mean, these weavings are very labor intensive, except for a person who could afford to have that person weaving. Maybe a member of the family, maybe a group within the family lineage who is responsible for the weaving. So there are two things that are going on here. The first is the weaving itself, which is technically extraordinary. And so often when we talk about Nazca and Paracas, the preceding textiles, we know that for years, weavers have tried to replicate the weaving technique of these peoples. The closeness of the weave, it's so close, it's amazing. I mean, look at it.
This one is really something apart from the rest of the pieces we're showing.
Because the weaving is so, you can barely see any space. So think of how tightly it has to be woven. And thinking all the while from the first time, these are backstrap loom pieces. So for the first time, and the women do this. The men work, the men weave, they do, but they do more utilitarian things. They might do a poncho. If you go into the high Andes today, you'll see men weaving. But they're weaving the sacks to carry the potatoes, they're weaving the ponchos, they might make little hats for their kids, but the ritual work is done by the women. The women are in charge of the ritual. So if you imagine, this is a really good one to imagine it with, so you imagine that a woman is sitting and she has a tree in front of her or some sort of a post, and she puts the threads around her waist and then ties them all the way up there. So the sash has the vertical or the warp threads. Then she starts to go back and forth to make the designs. So she's starting way up here, weaving, wrapping. This is a tapestry, and a tapestry weave means that instead of going in just one layer, it goes around, so the threads are wrapping around the loom, the threads on the loom. And as she is doing this, she has to think, what color do I put way at this side and make the design continuous all the way down to here? It is a mathematics. It's absolute
exercise,
mathematics.
And also memory exercise.
Yes, you have to remember what you want to do. So I think it's really important to understand the genius and the creativity of these peoples. But so often somebody will say, and I always get very upset about this, these people couldn't have done it. Must have been outer space. Must have been, there's no way they could have done like the Nazca lines. You know, there's no way they could conceptualize. What? They can conceptualize this, but they can't blow it up on a mountain? I mean, really? They have computers in their heads to be able to do this, to be able to make these designs. So technically, they're really extraordinary, just to think, what am I going to do? So if I start here, my threads have to be of the proper color so that the design is going to come out right all the way through.
And it's a very intricate design.
Very, very intricate.
You also, I have seen this so closely that I have started looking for small
Mistakes.
details.
Yeah.
Not mistakes. It's not a mistake, but for example, you have this small character here that it doesn't appear in the rest
Anywhere
of the
else. Yeah,
composition.
yeah.
So that may have been something that the person who did this wanted to show up, come up with something specific.
And it could sort of be like a signature too, that maybe that particular character is special to the person for whom it is, yeah. So they put some little thing in. And talk about mistakes, so I have to say about mistakes, there is always a mistake because nothing is perfect. And if it is perfect, the weaving goddess will not be happy because you will be more perfect than she. We know this, we can't talk to these people, but we can talk to Navajo Indians in the North American Indians who are great weavers. And the women weavers will say that it's the spider goddess for the American Indian, will say the spider goddess will not be happy if I'm perfect. I can't be better than she is.
That somehow relates to Greek, Roman mythology.
Yeah, exactly. These stories are very global, very universal through time.
So somehow we can include the collective unconscious as part of the discussion.
Sure, absolutely. Wow. And in the Andes, that collective unconscious that goes on for like 3,000 years, you can track the iconography, some symbolic elements from the Chavin, the very earliest cultures, all the way through the different culture areas through the Inca. I mean, there are elements here that look like Inca tunics, but the Inca is another 1,000 years past this. But that collective unconscious says, we need this symbolic repertoire. This symbol means something to that god or that goddess that we need to placate, we need to offer, we need to make sure that he or she is looking out for us. So they repeat certain things all the way through. And it's really quite extraordinary when you see the whole history, cultural history of the art, or what we call the art, through 3,000 years. And you start with the south coast of Peru to the north coast of Peru, and then you travel all the way to Bolivia, because remember, it was all the Inca Empire. So you travel all the way up to Bolivia, and 2,000 years later, the same character appears in Tiwanaku, the same exact guy. Now, how did he get there? How did he get there? Because the people trade, they're like missionaries, and it's very important to display the symbols for the religion from area to area. It's the same, basically, it's the same religion. It's a pantheistic religion. But depending on where they live, it will give the god or the goddess a different name. A god of the mountains, a goddess of the mountains, a Pachamama, is not going to be the same goddess that appears in the desert. It's the goddess of the sea in the desert. Why? Because they live on the coast and they need water. So, you know, it changes with the geography. So when you look at a piece like this, and there are very key elements in this piece that we're going to relate to other objects as we walk through. First of all, when we talk about Nazca is very figurative. The face, the serpents, the radiances are part of the Nazca symbolic repertoire. Wari, where you're crossing over into the warrior conquering this particular area. So they are going to, yes, they're going to borrow a lot of this, but their art is really geometric. It's made in little boxes, little geometric boxes. So that's what you see developing here. So this is the transition between Nazca and Wari. This is a very, very complex textile, even more complex than a lot of the things that early Nazca would do. Because once you have the influence of Wari, they conquer them, so they influence them, then you're going to have other elements present, but they're not going to forget the people that they conquered, which is why, with the Greeks and the Romans, the same thing, which is why there's a persistence of elements, there's a persistence of symbols, a persistence of designs. It's a syncretic process where you have things coming together. So Nazca Wari represents that. And there are many pieces here in this exhibit that are Nazca Wari, but there are also pieces that are just Nazca, earlier Nazca by 200-300 years, that don't have the rigors of all these little geometric things. Yeah. So there's no doubt that this piece appealed to Mr. Maldonado because of the geometry that is evident. And we know that this is what he's really interested in, the syncretism between the old and the new. That, I mean, there are pieces in this exhibit that you don't know whether they're old or they're new.
Yeah, you're right. You're right.
The designs, you know, look at it and say, oh, there's a Nazca, and they say, oh my gosh, that's not Nazca at all. That's new, you know. So the appeal of geometry is key to his collecting in the aesthetics of this particular gallery too, which is wonderful, because what does it do? It proves that it didn't end with the Inca. It went all the way through. So another 2,000 years with geometric elements. Now, why? You know, the question is, why geometry? Well, the first reason, of course, is that the earliest techniques before the textiles and long before the pottery are baskets, which he also collects. Beautiful baskets, beautiful baskets. Because when you think about a basket is 2 pieces of grass or straw or something. It has to be like this. You know, the design is absolutely determined by right angles. And even when you have a basket that's round, it's still woven on right. They've just bent it, but it's still, the weaving is still right angles. So you go from baskets and then you go to textiles, and it's still determined by right angles. And so whether it's the warps and the wefts, it's right angles. That's the way it goes. So that idea of geometric precision, and this is precision, doesn't end when the Inca Empire ends. It continues, and here we are today in the 21st century, repeating geometric elements. Why? Because they are historic. We might not say today, oh, this means such and such, but it meant something in the early days, because it was the first things they made were baskets to carry things, to be portable. And what does that mean? That when you have portable objects, you have portable people. So they can move because they can carry things with them. So they were very utilitarian and not ritual. And then once the people settled, a nomadic people settled, and they began to bury their dead in a ceremonial way, because they had to, for one thing, but because they could. But when you're a nomad, you don't put your grandfather in Missouri and travel to New York. No, you have to put your grandfather with you. And so once you settle in a place, you can do that. And once you do that, you can actually create the offerings that will be the remembrance of that particular person. And the carrying, being able to carry things, was really important. What are they carrying? They're carrying the body. And how are they protecting the body? They're wrapping the body in cloth. So the utilitarian part becomes the ritual part. And so the objects that we see, there's a textile in the other room, a Nazca, big Nazca textile, that's kind of stained. And I remember the other day when I was here, somebody said, you know, it looks kind of dirty. Yes, you don't want to know what that is, but it's body fluids, you know. It's been wrapped around a mummy, and the body fluids stain, and you're not going to clean it. You're not going to send that to the dry cleaner and say, get rid of the body fluids for me, please. That's what makes it genuine as something that went in the death cult ritual. So these little marks, these little symbols, had a meaning for the person who made this particular cloth. These little circular pieces, you know, they're kind of like that, squares and circles, probably relate to the architecture. A lot of the works relate to architecture. They repeat the pyramid, they repeat steps, zigzags and steps. Yeah. Because you have to reach the gods. So once these people settled and they began to build architecture, then they build higher and higher because they want to reach the gods, like the Egyptian pyramids. There was a reason for that. It wasn't just because they're beautiful and the tourists like it. They are getting closer to the gods. So many of these symbols relate to architecture. The shapes of temples, the shapes of tombs are probably what is behind this particular little square, rectangular piece. And then radiances, because they're gods, so they like radiances. Serpents, really important throughout the Americas, and different serpents for different territories. But the serpent, like Adam and Eve found out, has a story, has a meaning, but mostly because a serpent goes from the earthly world underneath to the underworld. He goes like this. So he's traversing this territory, and the gods, they want to bring the gods to earth, and they want to go to the gods. So like the tree of life is from the celestial sphere, the earthly sphere, the underworld. So the serpent represents that, the ability to go to the underworld. And what does he do when he goes into the underworld? He loses his skin. So he comes up new, like resurrection. He comes up new. So the serpent is a very important character in the symbolic repertoire of so many of these cultures throughout the Americas, throughout the world. I mean, you know, the serpent is everywhere. So the serpent appears, the radiances appear, the eyes appear. So the eyes of this character that we're going to see in many places belong to a creature called the oculate being. Oculate, because he has big eyes. He has big eyes because he can see into the future, and the soul is considered part, you know, of the eyes of the soul, the eyes into the heart, the eyes into the very being, the essence of a person. So the eyes become really, really important, and the oculate being is this creature that also traverses the various aspects of life, from the celestial, because he's a god, to the earthly, because they want to recognize him, and to the underworld, the world of the dead. So a lot of it is introduced here. Yeah.
I want to ask you something about the technical aspects.
Mm-hmm.
Are there any kind of symbolism included with the colors? Or also, are there different materials used for the different cultures you mentioned? The Nazca, the Wari.
Yeah, they're all camelid.
They're
all camelid. Yes. Right. Sometimes it'll be cotton as well. Some will have like cotton backings to them, and will integrate cotton fibers. but for the most part they're camelid. And alpaca is probably the animal that supplies the threads. As for the colors, it's really hard to know because the colors are determined by the availability of natural colors. They don't have, you can't go to the art store and buy the colors. So the colors are all natural. What they create, the reds come from beetles, and the greens might come from a grassy substance, but it's all very natural. So that is limiting as well. You know, they don't have the palette like we do, where you mix colors. It's all pretty straightforward, and the availability of sort of the reds and the greens and the yellows is probably because that's what was available. That's what they used, and those are really very dominant colors throughout the textile traditions, and you don't see it really brightening up into other colors. Except on some of the large pieces and the feather works, but this is more typical of the colors, the reds.
After that amazing explanation, we are in front of another beautiful piece of the collection, and definitely this one is a little bit different in several ways, but I wanted to explain to us how different it is, and to give us your expertise about this.
And why I stopped here. Right, because there are so many things to see. We can't do them all. But I stopped here for a number of reasons. First of all, technically this is different because it's made of pieces rather than the backstrap loom, the long, the long piece like the sashes, and there's another over there. This is made in pieces, and it probably has more cotton in it. Doesn't say, but it says camelid fibers, but it probably has a little cotton in it too. And I think even the stitches might be cotton, but it's pieces pieced together. And so it's different, but each piece, of course, has to be woven. And each piece, again, you can see the closeness of the weave. I mean, it's just, some of it is just so tiny. You can't imagine weaving that closely. So in addition to the technical, I like this piece. Well, and again, it shows damage after many years. There are tears in it, maybe little bugs have eaten it, who knows, and there's some stains because this is a burial piece. It's called an unku, and it's a man's tunic. Put your head through there, and it falls down to,
What we call right now a poncho.
Yeah, long poncho, very long poncho. And it's particularly big, and the people of the Andes are small. They're still small. So this was probably over the mummy bundle. So the mummy would be wrapped many, many layers, and the head would be with a mask and would be preserved in a certain way, and usually a mask goes over the head, and then the rest of the mummy is prepared. And this may have been the final piece, the final shroud, because it's so large. It's too large to be an everyday, not that it was an everyday piece, but even to just be the shirt of the mummy. So it was probably used for that point. And then another thing that fascinates me, the colors are the same, right?
Yes.
As in the other room. The very natural earth colors. But another thing about this, and why I chose to stop here, is because of the designs. Here you've got one of the most common designs that you find in pre-Columbian, especially Peruvian art, and that is the step design.
The chacana?
Yep, and that's the temple.
Going to the upper world.
The upper world, exactly, and it's like the it's a sacred temple shape as well. And it's a temple shape that in the earliest of these major culture areas, which is called Chavin, and Chavin was in a rocky area, so they used stone. So when they were carving out their stone, they made monuments and they made stairways, we say stairway to heaven, but that's exactly what it is. And it was able to be carved out of the stone. Once it becomes a significant factor in designs, in symbolic repertoire, it is repeated in many other places where they don't have stone. They don't have any stone where the Nazcas are. It's a desert. There's no stone here. But yeah, so only sand. So exactly. Very, very dry. So this textile has the symbol that they can't make in stone, but they put it on the cloth. So again, it's this persistence of a symbolic repertoire from one material to another. And the materials, again, are informed by the geographic territory in which the people live. When you get up into the high Andes, where the Inca are, there's a lot of monuments that look like this, many of them. And in fact, there are even small offerings that were found in the tombs of little stone pieces. And when you go to Machu Picchu as a tourist or Cusco as a tourist, they sell them. They're little tourist goods. I've got some in my house. I bought at the market. I bet you have them too. You have a little one of those. As everybody goes home with one of these little stone pieces as a memory, you know, a reminder, a souvenir of something that you see when you take the tour into the mountains. You see these buildings like that.
Somehow this transcends the geographical aspect of the South American center.
Yeah.
Because, you might find this in other cultures.
Absolutely, yeah.
In America.
In America. Yeah. And you find it in North America too, where they build the mounds and they build, you know, anything that's high, that reaches. And for the Maya, when they build their extraordinary pyramids, they're tombs. They're tombs. There's a burial underneath them. So what is it doing? It is saying, I want the person there to go to the gods. Let's make it easy. Give him a stairway to go to the gods.
The monument becomes kind of a vessel
Yeah.
for the soul.
For the soul. To go from one level to another. So this particular piece is a good transition to the pottery.
So Carol, we are now in front of one of the pottery nucleus that the exhibition have. And you have mentioned before the connection between some of the textiles and the pottery, especially related to the symbology represented in both. Can you expand a little bit?
Yeah,
what you have here?
I stopped here. There are textiles and pottery throughout the exhibit. But I stopped here because I think with this particular selection, we can really make those comparisons between the textiles and the symbols and what happens in the pots. The Nazca potters are famous for what are called polychrome pots because of the colors. They're painted, pre-fired, they're painted, and then they're fired, and then they're burnished. They're rubbed so the surface is shiny, which makes them particularly beautiful. You can see it, right? So that's what the technique is. You have to also remember they didn't have a wheel. So see the bottom of this particular one?
Yes.
You can tell that's not a wheel. That's not the precision of a wheel. So these are all handmade, totally by hand. The shapes are very typical of the shapes of Andean pottery. There's some other shapes that appear as well, but the drinking cup, a vessel such as this one, That's called a caro when it has this particular shape, and it really goes from Tiwanaku and Bolivia through the Incas. And the Incas, there are theories that the Incas actually came from that particular area of Bolivia. But in addition, another very interesting one is the stirrup spout that we just talked about. Okay. So before we talk about the images, I just want to mention the shapes, because the shapes are very typical of the shapes that you find in the Andes. The stirrup spout, this is a double spout stirrup vessel, and because it has two spouts. And it is totally impractical, right? Because it would take so long to get the water in there to make it do anything of utilitarian value. It is simply a ritual vessel. They put a little bit of water in there, and they pour it out, and when it pours out, it makes a whistling sound. So it animates itself. So that's one reason for it. The other reason for it is that stirrup connecting the two, like the little bridge, is a transition from one world to another world. It's also a balancing feature. Something we haven't talked about but is evident in many of the pieces is that there is, in the symbolism of the Andes, as there is in many other places of the world, this idea of balance. Male, female, right, left, yin, yang. And the balance, so this becomes a balancing element as well. It is professing balance. In this particular pot, which is a really beautiful pot, this is the balance of nature. So you see there are like little pods, seed pods, yes, down below, and then there's this character above who's like almost like a dragon figure. Kind of a feline, serpentine figure, and it's as if he is the guardian of the gardens. They had an irrigation system, they had to, coming from the mountains, and where they were able to control just enough water coming from the mountains to grow their little gardens, the crops to sustain themselves. But these were surely not huge agricultural productions, and the irrigation systems were quite extraordinary, considering 2,000 years ago they were doing irrigation systems in the desert to do that. But when they do something like that, they have to have a guardian. And the guardian is generally this kind of monstrous feline character. The feline, the cat, is ubiquitous throughout the Americas. He could be a jaguar. He could be a panther. We have panthers in Florida. Yeah. He could be any kind of a cat, a cougar, depending on where you live. A mountain jaguar, a desert cat. But the feline is really important because he's fierce. So like a lion, it's fierce. There are no lions there, but it's a fierce critter. And it also is a guardian figure. So
we're talking about top predators.
Absolutely, top predators. So it's not surprising that a feline appears throughout so many of the cultures where there are felines. In the Americas we have lots of different kinds of cats and felines. So what is also very interesting about felines in Nazca, in Peru, is the combination of the feline with something else. Generally, it is a serpentine form. So you have a cat-like face or fangs on a snake. So the idea of combining things, you have a figure that looks like a human figure, but then when you look at it closely, it's not a human figure, an anthropomorphic figure. So this idea of metamorphosis is shamanic. It's the shaman who is controlling the metamorphosis from the spiritual world. It's the shaman who's calling down that god, and the god is going to metamorphosize into the earthly world to assist the shaman in whatever the shaman wants. How does this
using different aspects of their own character?
Of their own character, from the cat.
Yeah.
And also with the use of hallucinogenic drugs.
All right.
Whether they're seeds, in Peru they use a lot of little seeds that they grind up, and it makes a very potent drug. It could be a mushroom. It could be, there's certain trees, especially in Mexico, there's certain trees that they use the leaves from to make these substances. So the shaman is in charge of the substance. And he takes that substance and becomes somebody else. He metamorphosizes into something else. There are images, especially in Mexico, not as much in Peru, but there are some in Peru as well, that actually show a figure, an anthropomorphic figure, that looks like a man, but when you look closely, he has claws of a cat. Or then you look closely and says, does he have ears of a cat? Or there might be some other elements that are like scales of a serpent. So this idea of metamorphosizing, why does the shaman do that? Because he wants the cat to help him. The cat's going to become his alter ego. So this idea of anthropomorphism and metamorphosis is strictly to assist with relations to the spirit world, taking the alter ego, taking the character, the personality, the features of the cat that you want. You want it to be fierce, then take the claws, take the fangs. So we see in so many images funny things happening. Let me see if I can find one here, where you've got, here's another one. There's a big eye there and an open mouth.
Is that an oculus?
That's the oculus again.
There you go.
They're seeing into the soul. So you see these things and these little flying creatures along on the edge. So it looks like a face, kind of like an angel that seems to be flying, but it's the combination creature. And along with the combination is the beautiful design elements that appear in the textiles, but appear in the pots as well, with these sort of stripes that control the various elements of the design. So it's not all over. It's very controlled. The various registers, we call them.
Something to do
They may, absolutely, they may have something to do with it. Like I call those creatures, those things like angels. They're almost like a glyph, but they seem to be flying on the upper level. And then what's happening on these other levels, it's a mystery.
Some kind of a fishy aspect.
And the sea is very important.
Yeah.
When you live on a desert on the coast, what are you eating? Fish. You know, so the sea is really important. And then here, okay, so this is one of my favorite because here is the oculate being.
All right.
Here he is. So this creature with the eyes has whiskers. So in this particular one, you see the cat. So the face is very cat-like, right?
Yeah.
And
The
with
ears.
whiskers and the ears. So, but on the other hand, he's actually got he's standing like a person holding staffs. He's got a staff in his hand because the staff it's a sign of agriculture as well. The staff is it not only represents. It's like a scepter, but it's also practical. Because it becomes like a digging stick for the planting. So there's so many things that are going on in this particular vessel with this character that appears with this feline mask. And we know that buried with the dead are masks where this mask is gold.
Oh, wow.
So that, that represents the gold mask that might have been put on the mummy. Why? Because they want that mummy to relate to the aspect of the feline as protection.
And the condition of this piece is
this is beautiful.
It's really shiny compared to some others. So this one,
Yeah,
wow.
it's
really
it's when they burnish it after the firing. They will burnish it to bring the shine out of it as well. So
And that passes through different cultures also. I mean, the technique passes from the Nazca to the Wari to the Inca.
it does, and the only differentiation may be because of the availability of the clay. Because the clay in the desert is going to be different from the clay for the the mountains or the valleys. So they have different colors of clay, and that is a very determining factor. Not only the color of the clay, but the consistency of the clay. So they have to learn to work with the material in order to fire it, in order to paint it, in order to burnish it. So like the textile involves so many steps in the process of the thinking, the weaving, the computer in the head of the weaver, the same thing happens here. They have to be very careful to know the limitations of their materials and to use materials that they're comfortable with. So this particular clay is not going to be the same clay that you'll find in Tiwanaku or in Cusco. It's going to be different, and it's going to determine again what happens with the way they're able to shape it and to fire it. The material is a very determining factor.
Are there any difference between the bottoms of some of them? Because a lot of them are like a round bottom, and some of them, like that one,
Are pretty flat. The round bottoms are usually because they're going to stick it into the sand of the tomb.
All right, okay.
So it stabilizes it in the sand of the tomb. It's, like a little...
That song once again talks about not being made for...
No, it's made to be put in a tomb. When they open up many of these tombs, they find hundreds of vessels, and some are upright, but others are just lined up, one right after another.
Actually, I think about it. It makes it more stable.
Yes.
The bottom is round.
Yeah.
Because it will fit perfectly in the sand.
It's easier to put in the sand.
That might
fall over. Yeah. Exactly. So there are lots of practicalities that are important for ritual objects, and we can tend to think, it's a ritual object, it's not a utilitarian, it's not a practical object, but at the same time, it has to be practical for that reason, for the needs of the tomb, just like the needs of a kitchen have certain things, a tomb would have certain requirements and needs. So it becomes very much of a determining factor as well. So let's see, what else can we look at? Well, this particular piece right here, with its sort of arrows, the arrow shapes, that's very beautiful abstraction, right?
Yes.
This one, very beautiful. The way this sort of stripe, they look like it in the central register, right?
Tessellation. As you mentioned before, the bipolar options.
The balance.
The balance.
Everything has to be in balance.
Yin-yang kind of situation they are presented. Okay, Carol. We are now in front of a very, very, very peculiar piece.
Peculiar.
It's the least I can say about it. Because, the first time that I saw it, it really amazed me. The whole construction of it. The image is something that is really undescribable. I would say. But
very unusual.
Have to somehow take us to this trip.
This is why I wanted to come here before we end this discussion, because this is one of the most unusual things I have ever seen, and I've seen a lot of textiles in my life, and it's also one of the most beautiful in a very strange way. This is like op art. It's the visual that appears in this piece it's kinetic, it moves, it's optical because your eyes move with it, but to talk about it's a sash. So it would have wrapped around the mummy, and whoever made this, well, I'm going to speculate. I am going to speculate that this was an incredibly talented weaver, for one thing. Let's give her that credit, because she was. The weaving itself is remarkable, and all the different elements of it. And this is what I was talking about. So this would have been attached to the back, or this side, and then it would have been stretched out on the backstrap loom, and the designs would have been made moving along. And so what was going on in the head of this particular weaver moving along? It's very, very interesting, because there are elements of it that are, you know, nice stripes, colorful stripes at both ends. And then you have to wonder, what happened here?
From here.
Yeah.
From this point on, it's kind of an explosion.
Exactly. The design vibrates.
Yes.
And you talk about energy, there is something going on here that, again, speculating that the person was either had been weaving a little too long and maybe had put herself into a trance of some sort, or she was weaving too long and needed some assistance to get her through the night or whatever. So maybe was taking a little something. It might have been just chicha. It doesn't necessarily have to be mushrooms, but you know, maybe, you know, she's sitting there with this and these teeny weeny little weavings and says, you know, I think I'll have another drink. And then when you get to this part, it gets, like you say, it explodes with these lightning elements that don't make any sense at all, considering how exact Nazca Wari, especially Wari textiles, are, with everything so very, very carefully aligned. This is not aligned at all. And I would be curious to know what the original intention was. Was it just stripes? And then she sort of got carried away and said, well, you know, I'm sort of bored. I probably started here because these are more exacting. And then, you know, something happens every so often. You get this beautiful element and this little checkerboard. Yeah, that's amazing weaving that happens right there with this sort of checkerboard. Tiny. Very tiny.
Tiny and so different.
Yeah, from everything else. That's you really have to wonder. I also don't think you can discount the idea of almost a sampler, because samplers are there are many examples of samplers in the tombs that have been found, where the weaver is demonstrating skills. And it's like, I'm the wife, I'm the weaver, and I want to be remembered for all of the things that I can do. So it's a sampler. This is a sampler for the dead. It's not like American samplers that, you know, from Boston or someplace, where they're demonstrating for their children all the different things that they can embroider. This is not going to be an example. This is for the dead. So maybe she wanted to say, this is what's happening.
This is me.
This is me.
What
and I can do this. And, you know, maybe it's the energy of the death cult ritual that she is looking towards. Because remember, she would have started this probably before anybody died. You know, once the person is in the tomb, that's it. So this is something that has to be in preparation. So what is she preparing for? You know, you can speculate. You can make a telenovela out of this, but
yes, but at the end we have
an amazing piece.
A fact.
A fact.
It's an amazing piece, as you mentioned before, and something that really stands out from the whole.
Yeah,
production.
I've never seen anything like it before. It's quite extraordinary, and I think it's a wonderful conclusion to the textiles in here, right?
Yeah, it's a very interesting
very interesting. Yes, exactly. Technically, especially technically, because what's going on here is quite amazing. An experiment, maybe, but it's quite beautiful.
It's unique.
It is unique, yeah.
Okay, Carol, we are here once again in front of a very interesting pottery from different cultures. We have Nazca and Wari, and let's start going once again in our trip to know more about that.
Well, this particular piece, when we were talking about the combination creatures, metamorphosis, and combining what is significance about one creature with the significance of another. So it's a face that has monkey ears and a monkey brow, the big eyes again. The tongue could be anything. You usually equate the tongue with the cat. You know,
Okay.
and also the whiskers, that kind of mask-like element, is the whiskers of a cat. And then he's got a very long tail with sort of spikes on the end of it. So it becomes serpentine, but very unique, the spiky elements and what it represents. But it's he's not a friendly monkey.
But he's a guardian.
He's a guardian. They're all guardian figures. Yeah.
He's
So
probably doing his job.
right. So moving from the monkey to a serpentine vessel. So this particular one is a series of serpents wrapping around in a fabulous design. These overlapping colors and the overlapping designs of the serpent. It's really very, very beautiful with the eyes. And you see how they will alternate. So you have a white serpentine face with black eyes or dark eyes, and then you have the red one with the yellow eyes, and the alternation of the design of it is exquisite.
And once again,
Absolutely
we're talking
exquisite.
about the yin yang.
Yeah,
kind
the
of,
balance. The balance.
It also reminds a little bit of MC Escher.
Yeah,
some
the
of
repetitive,
tessellations, yes.
the repetitions, and with each repetition, there's a little change, which is what Escher does as well. So just like the snake changes from color to color, shape to shape, it is a way of, it's a balancing act. Extraordinary design facility, amazing. So what else do we have here? We have, so this is Wari. The Wari came after the Nazca and conquered a huge region that went from the south coast of Peru all the way to the central coast and even into the Andean region. The Nazca were gone, but the Wari borrowed elements that they thought were key. And so you see these, like these paws, the paws that are, you know, they're really related to feline paws that make up this particular design, but highly simplified. There's one thing that Wari does, and this is a simple, very simple pot compared to many of the others that they do. But everything, the idea of registers, putting things in their little boxes, is quite typical of what the Wari does. Compared to this, yes. And you see how much more complex the geometric organization, the registers are in this particular one, but also you see the relationship with Nazca.
Yeah.
I mean, they've taken Nazca, what they wanted from Nazca, and then they've made it their own by complicating the design with all of these geometric elements. Bird. This is a beautiful piece too, with a series of birds around it. Nature is very basic to all of the designs of the Nazca potters.
And we once again have here the oculus over there.
The guy with the eyes and different elements. So it has been like deconstructed. Some creature has been deconstructed here so that you've got a paw, you've got an eye, you've got other elements that...
Maybe the metamorphosis.
As they're changing. It's changing from one thing to another. But see the rim with kind of these little striped characters, that's very typical of Wari Tiwanaku, where they've got small elements, small geometric elements throughout their design. You don't see that as much in Wari.
Some snakes.
Yeah, it could be a snake. Yeah, absolutely. Could be a snake. the snakeskin. They're just beautiful, amazing.
Well, thank you so much, Carol.
No, it's a pleasure. I
It
could
was
go on and on.
An amazing journey.
But I
It was
won't.
An amazing journey, and we're so honored and pleased to have you here.
Yeah.
We reach knowledge about this collection that we didn't have before.
Yeah. Well, and there's
we pass
more.
it to the next generations.
Yeah.
Because I think that it's really important.
Yeah, it's education.
For the collection to have this kind of conversations and to pass this kind of knowledge through different generations to come.
It's the heritage.
Yes, it is.
I mean, this is the heritage of the
much.
Americas, so
Yeah.
it's important.
Thank you so much. And
You're
thank
welcome.
you guys
Yeah, thank you.
for attending this amazing video.